Heyo peeps, Archdruid Ray here, coming to you guys with a new video. This is going to be a little bit different than a lot of my other videos I've done in the past. I've done like a lot of gameplay, discussion, etc. videos. I'm going to be finally dipping my hands and feet and everything else into this pie that everybody likes to call, you know, and like to use quite heavily in this community. But we are going to be doing a tier list. Specifically on Doctor's add-ons and my opinions on their strengths across the board compared to one another and how they affect Doc's gameplay as a whole. So I kind of want to jump right into this. I'm going to be going briefly over each of the add-ons, explain kind of what they do, kind of sort of how they affect his gameplay as a whole. Like there are various effects in everything therein. So, how about we get started into it? We're going to just start off brown, like common add-ons, and just work our way up the rarity list here. And we'll see where we go. It's going to be top to bottom, left to right, so the order will matter on each of the tiers, so I just figured I'd state that in advance for all of you. We're going to start things off probably quite simply here, Maple Knight. This add-on, if you do not know what it does, it simply just passively shows you the cone or the shape of Doctor's shock in front of you at all times. So it's very useful for when you're learning and like first playing Doctor, so like, you know, for your first handful of games, you're probably going to have a handful of these. I'd recommend using them, but outside of, like, on your initial learning and once you get used to how the cone of his shock therapy works, it doesn't really find much use, honestly. So, on a scale such as this for the tier list, it goes straight down to D. Just purely because you're not going to be using it much outside of your initial matches, probably, with him. It's just not an incredibly useful one. It's like kind of nice and like that's good, but that's about where it stops at. Anyways, we're gonna move right on to the next one. We got our brown calm add-on, so it's calm 1. This add-on has both a passive and an affliction. The affliction stays the same across the board for the various tiers of all of Doctor's add-ons for the do afflictions. The only thing that changes is the strength and whatnot of the passive effect on them. And Calm's passive will slightly decrease or increase the Doctor's terror radius based off of if his Static Blast is on or off cooldown. So it'll be increasing it if it's off of cooldown, and if it's on cooldown, it shrinks it by the reverse. So it'll go back to what your base terror raise is, and then subtract it when it's on cooldown, if that makes sense. So think of it as like a plus or minus from your base. And the brown one is 4 meters. For plus or minus, and the affliction, just you have a chance, like it's a random sort of chance. I believe it's also on maybe a timer. I can't really remember off the top of my head on that one, mostly because I'm not a really big fan of the affliction. It's not really that great. It, simply put, has a chance when you're not in the Doc's terror radius to start playing like the very, very vestige edge of Doctor's terror radius for a set duration. And that's all the affliction does. It's kind of lackluster. It's not very good. And as such, it's still like more usable because its passive is good. Its passive is pretty alright. And thus I'm slamming the brown one into C tier. Next one, we have Order, Class 1. So, this has, again, all the Affliction add-ons for Doctor have a passive, and the Affliction that they apply to survivors. The passive for the Order add-ons is it just lowers your Static Blast's cooldown by a set amount. The brown one lowers it by 2 seconds, and I'll get into the others when we get to them, but they all apply the Order Affliction, and what this does is every 20 seconds it will spawn, if there is any of them available, it will spawn a pallet, a fake pallet, where a pallet used to be. So the pallets had to have been like kicked by the Doctor previously in order for them to start spawning. But you can see the auras of these pallets, and if a survivor runs through them, the survivors will hear the Doctor laugh, and the pallet will, like the fake pallet, will disappear. So it's purely just an illusion. It's kind of alright because it can throw people off if they don't have good communication, or if they aren't paying attention to what pallets have been used. People may run to a fake pallet, end up, oh crap, I'm not in a spot where I thought I would be safe, and you can land hits. It's alright. The passive on it is really weak. The numbers on it are really, really, really weak, but I don't really see them ever buffing the numbers because they would get a little too out of control. And I really don't think that they can generally touch the passive on this one too terribly much. But as such, it's going to be a little bit higher than Calm, and it's going to be in C tier as well. I'm going to just move right along, because after I get the base explanations of everything done, it'll be just various number changes between the different tiers of add-ons. So next one, we have Moldy Electrode. This, quite simply, just increases the range of your shock therapy cone by 2 meters. It's actually really decent. There's no downside to using it. The only minute downside is this just increases the cone's range. Like, its forward furthest range. So as such, at the closer points of the cone to the Doctor, it technically narrows a little bit. That's only minute downside and doesn't really play much of a role in most matches. So it's rather decent for a brown add-on. It's all around just good. I generally don't like using the range add-ons. I still feel like they are a little bit on the overtuned side a little bit. People would probably disagree with me on this. This is my opinion. But as such, I'm putting in B tier. It's a pretty solid add-on. You get plenty of them. I would, however, caution one thing. If you want to use the range add-ons that Doctor has, because he has multiple of them, I highly recommend do not use them when you are learning to play the killer. It will end up throwing you off, especially if you do not have a ready stockpile of them. It's going to hinder you from improving and getting used to his base kit. And once you've adjusted to that, then I would start mixing in the add-ons, and you can feel like the changes in your gameplay there. It is decent quality of life. It is a brown, so you'll probably have plenty of them. As such, slamming in B tier. And now we move on to yellows. Uncommon rarities. Let's go. So, again, we have 5 add-ons in the uncommon tier. They are 4 of them are afflictions, and 1 is a range add-on. So I'm going to just quickly go to it. The afflictions don't change between the tiers of them. The only thing that changes is the numbers on the passives. So, Yellow Calm, its increase and reduction in terror radius is 6 meters, plus or minus. So, slightly better than the brown one. And as such, I'm just slamming it over here in B tier, because it's pretty alright add-on, especially when you combo it with maybe another Calm add-on. More specifically, because if you do that, you can shrink your terror radius down pretty small. Catches people off guard quite often. Next one. This is a new affliction add-on that we haven't spoken of yet. This is probably his one of his two strongest afflictions, I'm going to say. This one is called Discipline, and there's no Discipline 1. It starts at Discipline 2 and goes up from there. What this add-on does is it will slightly decrease the shock detonation delay of Doctor's shock therapy, because Doctor, when he uses his shock therapy, has to charge up 1 second to shoot it out, and then as soon as it finishes that first second, it takes a full 1 second after to actually apply its effect and shock survivors. This add-on lessens that delay by a fraction of a second. The yellow one here, so Discipline 2, lowers it by a grand total of 0.1 second. Do not underestimate that. It is very potent. I have been of the opinion that I feel these add-ons need to be looked at again. That's my own personal opinion. I'll stick to it. But that's a different story for a different day. But I'm going to be putting it right here in B tier above the Calm add-on because it is very potent in Chase. Now, I didn't mention the Affliction because I wanted to get into that now. The Affliction for Discipline is whenever somebody's in Madness 2 and above and they enter into a chase with the Doctor, Doc's red stain goes away. And instead, it appears on the back of the survivor they are chasing, as long as they are in Madness 2 or 3. This also has the added ability that when survivors are in Madness Tier 3, this effect stays on them the entire time they are in Tier 3 until they snap out of it. I do believe they've removed it to where the chase music won't be playing the constantly out of chase, but that might be a bug. I need to do some testing and double checking on that. But it's very potent because it can give a lot more readily, easily mind games at tiles and loops, especially ones that don't have good line of sight, because survivors do heavily rely upon both audio cues and visual cues, specifically the red stain and the heartbeat, and this throws those kind of out the window for survivors. It's very strong, it's very potent. Even at its lowest tier here, it is still a very, very strong add-on. Alrighty, next one. We have Order. We've already gone over the Affliction, but Order Class 2. Order Class 1 had minusing 2 seconds off of your Static Blast. Class 2 lowers it by 4. So the scaling on it isn't that great. I'm still going to be putting it down here in C tier. And our next and last affliction, because he has 4 in total, 4 different afflictions that Doctor can apply with his add-ons. This is called Restraint, and by and far my favorite of his afflictions, because it purely gives you information. What you do with that information, you still have to, make good plays and make smart decisions on your own. The passive is, whenever somebody tears up in Madness, you get to see their aura for a brief duration. And at Restraint Class 2 here, it is 1 second. It's still pretty decent. It's only really useful for this 1 second if you are close to the survivors, because if you're further away, the scream bubble of them tearing up could block out the aura a little bit. All in all, still really solid. The Affliction, however, applies most specifically in Madness 2, because normally you can only see your Doctorly illusions when survivors are in Tier 3. However, this add-on allows you to see your Doctor illusions in Madness 2 as well, meaning you're able to see the fake Doctor illusions that pop up and spawn near survivors through walls at -2 and 3. It's very potent, very good information. It makes the illusions last longer as well. So it has the added benefit of that. So you can keep tabs on where various different survivors are if you're paying attention to the tiers of madness that they are in. I'm putting it here in B tier. Very strong add-on, very good affliction. One of the 2 best afflictions that he has, that he can apply. Next, we have Polished Electrode. Another range add-on that he has in his repertoire. And the Moldy Electrode was 2 meters. The Polished Electrode is 3 meter increase. And I'm putting this in A tier. It's very good, very strong, slightly better than this, and makes it come right out of B tier into A tier, in my opinion. I'm going to just truck right along into our rare add-ons. So, Discipline Class 3, same affliction as what I had stated previously. This, however, lowers the detonation delay instead of 0.1 seconds, but by 0.2 seconds. And by the way, the passive on these discipline add-ons do stack, and it is very brutally strong. So if you were to combine, say, Class 2 and Class 3, you would get 0.3 seconds off of that detonation delay. It's very strong, and very, very difficult for pretty much anyone to be able to deal with at loops. It's very, very strong. This is going straight up into A tier as well. Discipline, in my opinion, is one of Doctor's strongest add-ons that he has at his disposal. We move on to Restraint Class 3. This has the same affliction. It's passive. Instead of revealing the auras of increased madness of survivors by 1 second, this will give you the aura reading for 2 seconds, which is pretty good. I like it. I dig it. It's my favorite add-on pretty much in his entire kit as a whole. I love Restraint. It's one of the only add-ons I actually will run on a regular basis, but I don't do it that often, even still. I'm putting it straight up into A tier, and we move on to High Stimulus Electrode, one of the last of his basic range add-ons that he has in his kit. This one, however, increases it by 4 meters instead of 3 from the Polished and 2 from the Moldy Electrode, putting it straight at the top of A tier. Now we come to some very interesting add-ons, and I feel like they're kind of just very odd because one is very good and the other is nigh unusable. I'm going to go with the one that I like better, which is Interview Tape. This has a very interesting, when I say interesting modifier to Doc's shock therapy, is it focuses Doc's shock therapy from a cone into a 2 meter wide, 24 meter long line. So it becomes kind of like a sniper shot for your shock therapy. It does make it harder to land at close-up loops, but it can be useful to shut down longer loops because you'll be able to very easily have the range. You just have to be a little bit better at predicting survivor movement to see if they're going to try and juke your shock. It's pretty good, pretty solid add-on as a whole. It does go all the way up towards the top of A tier for me, personally. I dig it. I like it. I love it. It's fun from time to time. Now we move on to this one. God, I wish they would change this add-on for the better. It is in such a terrible state. The fact that when they did bring it back with his add-on update last year in 2020, the fact that they didn't really like make changes to it, they didn't tweak it any, they just literally re-put it back into the game after it had been removed briefly, it makes me sad. Essentially what it does is it turns your shock therapy from a cone into a ring that is away from the doctor. So like it is positioned, I think about 8 meters ahead of you, the center of it is, and then there's a ring with an inner and outer radius that is projected around that center. And it's just really awful. It doesn't feel good. If you use range add-ons with it to like increase the range, all it does is push the ring further away from Doctor and make it even more unplayably unusable. It is really awful. There's very niche moments where it can be used to like throw people off, but as soon as they know you have this on, people can play against you so easily. It is really bad. I'm putting it all the way down in D tier, even below the Maple Knight. It's just such a bad add-on. I really wish that I could give some feedback to make a good change for it, but what can you do? It's just all around, I would never, ever recommend using this add-on at all, period. It is bad. It is atrociously bad. And I will rant on that. But I'm not going to continue doing so here. Next, we move on to the final form of all of the Affliction add-ons, which happen to be all 4 of his very rare tier of add-ons. We're going to start things off with Restraint, Carter's Notes. Instead of classes, they turned it into Carter's own personal notes. Restraint, Carter's Notes. The passive goes from 2 seconds at class 3 to 3 seconds. It's very long-lasting, same affliction. So, in my opinion, it goes right up here, just above its predecessor, all the way up in A tier. It does come out slightly ahead from Discipline for me because I value information in this game significantly more, due purely on my own merit of my skill with the killer. Some others might want something that will help them more in chase. I don't find it necessary for myself. And again, these are my opinions. So be it. Next, we go to Order. This lowers the cooldown of your Static Blast. Instead of 4 seconds with the Class 2, this lowers it by 6 seconds. So if you were to stack both this purple one and the yellow one, you would get 10 seconds off of your Static Blast. But that's about all you're really getting. That's not really worth stacking both add-ons for it. This, however, is still going to end up a little bit higher up here, just because 10% off of your Static Blast still has merit, still is pretty decent, and it's still a little bit stronger than all of these previous add-ons. So it is going right on all the way to the top of B tier for the moment. We are going to move on to Calm, Carter's Notes. This increase and reduction of your terror radius, based off of the cooldown of your Static Blast, is plus or minus... I could have been wrong, actually. I think it was mid. Uno momento. No, I'm right. Yeah, I'm just, like, second-guessing myself, I guess. Anyways, Calm. The increase and reduction is 8 meters. This is the same strength as a Monitor in Abuse when out of chase, for if your Static Blast is on cooldown. It is pretty damn good, especially if you stack it with another Calm. You can get really small terror radius as a full 115 move speed killer, And that is very, very strong as a whole. Um, in my opinion, this still, even with all of its strength that it has in it, still doesn't manage to break out of B tier. It's a real shame. Still a good add-on, but there's ones that are definitely better than it, for sure. Next, and but not least, from the very rare add-ons, we have Discipline Carter's Notes. This lowers the shock detonation delay by 0.3 seconds. This is absolutely massive. It is very noticeable when you are using it to shock people in chase. It makes it so much easier to get denials, especially with the advent of dedicated servers. I heavily recommend this because when I'm saying recommend, I mean I'm heavily recommending to not, I will repeat this again, to not utilize discipline add-ons when you are learning this killer. It will throw off your muscle memory if you are using these, and then you have to not be using them. If you are using discipline add-ons when you are learning Doctor, it will throw off your timing so badly when you are forced to not use them. I just cannot get over that enough to you guys. Do not use it when you're learning. It will throw you off. It will feel bad if you do not have it and you are so used to using it. Don't become add-on, like super add-on reliant. Like, yeah, throw add-ons on occasionally, have fun, etc. I'm just saying, for your enjoyment for the killer, I heavily recommend do not use discipline add-ons when you are learning the killer. But, going back to the tier list, this is our very first S tier add-on. That passive is hard to deny. The affliction is, in my opinion, his strongest affliction he has because it helps you in chase. The passive is very strong in chase. It emphasizes everything of Doc's kit that is a very aggressive in chase. It's very good. It's very strong. That's all there is to it. Like, there's nothing, there's no real downside to it other than if you're learning, don't use it. My opinion. Now we move on to Doctor's Iridescent add-ons. We have his Iridescent King. I have a long history of despising this add-on. Back before he was updated, it was bad. After he was updated and they changed it, it's still really bad. Its effect is as soon as survivors are in madness, so essentially once a survivor has hit madness 1, you can't leave madness effect ever again. This add-on, all it does is it passively applies all 4 afflictions to that survivor. That's all it does. You don't get the passives of the affliction add-ons. You purely just get the 4 afflictions: calm, order, restraint, and discipline. All applied to the survivors as soon as they're in madness. It's so frickin' lackluster because 2 of his afflictions are very, very meh. The restraint is good, discipline is really strong, but calm and order, those afflictions aren't super great. All in all, not a really solid add-on, not a really good one for, you know, having him be one of his iridescents. It's such a letdown. They could do a lot of interesting things, and this is what we have. I dislike it. It's not very great. It's still pretty alright. Just for the fact that you do get access to all 4 afflictions. If I were you, if you were wanting to like have 2 decent add-ons and you want to like throw on Eerie King and like range or something, I still would recommend heavily, if you were to want Eerie King, just run like Restraint Discipline, because then you'd get the best of both worlds and you'd get both passives and get more value out of it than this add-on. I guarantee it. So, After all this shit talking I've been doing about it, you would think, where would I put it on this list? It's at the top of B tier. It's still, like, the passiveness of it is not very fun, but I can't deny the fact that you get those afflictions, 2 of them being kind of lackluster, but you still get 2 of his strongest ones. It's still pretty decent. It's still pretty alright. I just really dislike it. It's not a very interesting add-on. My opinion. We move on to his last add-on, and this was the most recently added add-on that he has. It is his Iridescent Queen. Iridescent Queen is quite the add-on, might I add. I haven't placed in its proper rank yet, so don't mind me just placing it here for a moment. I want to thoroughly read this description for you guys, so that way you can see it. Essentially, anytime a survivor is hit with shock therapy or static blast, they get a lingering charge on them. The static charge remains on the survivor until it is discharged. Multiple survivors struck by the same shock therapy or static blast that are within 4 meters of each other do not acquire a charge. However, anytime a survivor is within 4 meters of another survivor carrying a static charge, the survivor receives a shock with identical effects as the shock therapy special ability, and the static charge is discharged immediately. So essentially, it holds a brief charge on somebody that stays on them till they come close to another person, and then it'll zap them, causing them to scream, reveal their location. It's information. It can be very useful to just overall enhance the strength of Doctor's kit as a whole. If you're pressuring people into higher tiers of madness constantly, you can force people to snap out of it more often. All in all, it's a very potent effect. It's very constant, prevalent throughout the entire match. You will feel its effects at all times. Say like somebody unhooks, the person who's unhooked shocks the person who unhooked them, and the unhooked, if they have a charge, would shock the person who just got unhooked. And that might be enough to push them into another higher tier of madness, be it tier 2 or tier 3 or all of the above, you know? It's very strong, it's very good, it's interesting, it's flashy, and it's, in my opinion, very worthy of the title of Iridescent Addon for his ultra rares. As such, this even conquers out, in my opinion, Discipline in terms of strength and fun factor. It is really good. It is really strong. Enjoy it. Use it. Have at it. I am a big fan of it. Anyways, so there you guys have it. That is my tier list and rambling explanations of Doctor's add-ons. Hopefully you guys may have found this kind of helpful and that you may have enjoyed this. Let me know what you guys think. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to let me know down in the comments if you want to see more type of content like this. And if you have any questions or comments or concerns, feel free to let me know as well. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you, my friends, and take care, and goodbye. Peace, my friends.